he fainted on the beach. Yeah, and he was by himself. And the only reason that I knew about it is because my brother called me up. My brother, who largely had been MIA during a lot of what we were dealing with, he called me and said, Daddy's just gotten off the plane. He's going right into ER. And I'm like, what? And first of all, I had always been my father's confidant, and we were like this, especially when all of this with Chip and all that happened. And so that was a direct hit to me, and I think that he was upset with me because when I was trying to get him to go to Aruba to take this rest, he really kept fighting me. And I was like, why are you, this is what you should go, you should go. And now I realize he was probably terrified to go on that trip alone because he knew that something was not right. And it's interesting because in hindsight, a long time after, I saw photos of him during the time when he was doing the work in Europe for bubbling brown sugar, and I see how thin he was. Mm-hmm. And I think, how could I not?
So he comes from Aruba to New York after having fainted and getting sick there. Mm. But I'm sure they're not quite aware of what's going on. And then he gets into the ER in New York. What's the sort of diagnosis or what begins to happen after that?
Yeah, well, first of all, when I saw him, he was just a shadow of what he was. I mean, he was terrified, and he was, 90 pounds soaking wet. And he had a salmon mask on his mouth because they thought that he had TB, which of course they found out he did not have TB.
Or in New York?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, what happened between the plane and the hospital.
So you said they medicated him for TB, or did they?
No, I don't think they medicated. They just wanted him to be in isolation. So when we first went to visit him in the hospital, when he was admitted, got his room, he was in isolation until he was cleared for not having TB. And then he stayed in the hospital to be treated for what was now becoming full-blown AIDS.
So then after that period, he's released. They figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. Released, but obviously go home and he's going to need some care. Mm-hmm. Who's taking care of him, or how does he take care of himself?
I'm taking care of him. Which I was happy to do. When he came back home, the thing that was really difficult was that I then had to, you say care for him, I really had to care for him, which meant that I had to learn how to give him his IV drips and all the meds. And I mean, the meds are one thing. IV drips and cleaning catheters are something else. It's, I essentially went through like a crash course in, as a medical student in 6 months. That was hard. That was really hard.
So you wind up being doing that daily stuff.
Had a nurse come in to show me how to do it.
So what's your everyday like in terms of just?
Every day was just trying to get through. Every day was just staying organized, keeping on top of everything that needed to happen with him, medically. And those drips that I had to give him when he was at home, that happened 3 times a day. So as soon as you sort of turned around and were finished with that, then you were on to, the rest of whatever. So,
and you're cooking meals and taking care of him
and
in
you're
that
cooking
way.
meals and, yeah.
And what medications? Like, was he on a couple?
Oh, no, not a couple. He was on everything from, the med that helped him keep thrush in control, which was a thing in the mouth. There was Bactrim, which was a daily drip, Encyclovir, Hepagen. I mean, I don't even recall all of the meds anymore now, but
everybody back then was taking
AZT.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Poison.
Did he take that?
He refused. I mean, my father was open to anything and everything, but when it came to AZT, there was no discussion about it. He would not take that.
And around that time, there was also a lot of talk, and even people who have cancer or anything, of alternative things to do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we tried everything. I mean, there was a wonderful Chinese doctor that he would go to in Soho who did a lot of pressure point stuff, and for a while, it seemed to be helping. It's such a roller coaster, and you know, you hear the term "good days and bad days," and it's literal. You know, you're one day it seems like, oh, we're beating this. Yeah, you're good. You're eating. You're all this, and then the next day he faints, and it's all over again, and pneumonia, and it's just. Those days that were good days were the ones where you felt like, you know, maybe you're gonna kick this. You're gonna beat it in its own game, and then it would just rear its ugly head, and you just did what you could do. But he was absolutely open to. I mean, it's all about research and remedies, and you know, the diets, and you know, all of that.
And then he left us. I mean, is there anything you learned from those challenges of battling the disease right alongside your father?
Yeah. I think I should go back to your last question, because I don't know if I really answered it. You asked me...
There was a moment when you thought he might beat this.
Yeah, and it made me think of just good memories. So I just wanted to share that with you. Those times, especially when he had an appetite, those were really wonderful days. And it wasn't like we were restricted to only order from Denny's. I mean, we were in New York City, so we could get anything from Ethiopian to kosher deli, you know. And some days he'd want Mexican, and some days he'd want Chinese. And but usually he'd want soul food. He'd want comfort food, the food that he remembered probably growing up as a child that made him feel good. So I'd go down a few blocks to a dive called the Pink Teacup, and I'd bring him back to the hospital. Bring him back smothered pork chops with rice and collard greens and cornbread and some sweet tea, and he was just... I watched him like a little kid, like I watch my children now, because they're just happy, and you're happy when they're happy, and you just watch them, you know.
What did you learn? Because then he eventually left us.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn any specific thing from the challenges of trying to battle the disease along with your father?
I learned a lot of things. I learned that everybody needs someone in his or her corner. And especially if you're dealing with an illness, that you have to have someone who can advocate for you. Otherwise, you're just as, you know, I don't know.
You mean like in the hospital, or just during those daily? In
the hospital. You have to have someone who, you know, there's a funny line from Mommy Dearest, and she's cleaning the dirt, you know, and she's saying, you have to stay on top of it every second. And I used to laugh at that line all the time, but it's not a joke in a real way, because especially with the hospital situation and, you know, being in the hospital, if you're not on top of it every minute, and if you don't know what every pill is for and when it's supposed to be taken and what's being administered and all of that.
So you were there for every pill?
I was there all day, every day. I was there from 7 in the morning until the
You're
evening.
there to essentially advocate for him,
Absolutely.
make sure everything's cool. Did all the patients have that?
Absolutely not. That floor, Cronin 7, which was an AIDS floor, I don't know, most of those people, those guys, they didn't have people come see him. Didn't.
What moments do you choose to remember most about your father as you think of his life?
See, now you're going to get all Barbara Walters on me, make me cry. I think I choose to remember his vivaciousness and his big love of life. How he made me feel dancing, and just made me feel safe, and you're going to have to stop. You know, the constant reassurance and belief. Hopefully, you take that away from you, that you take away from your parents. Hopefully, your parents have instilled that in you, that they're always there to reassure you and tell you it's going to be okay. But I think more than anything, I'm going to try to get through this without completely disintegrating. I think he taught me how to love. And what I mean is, I don't think I could be a good mother without that. And my mother didn't teach me that. My father did. And Chip. And it may not be the expected story or concept of family or what it's supposed to be. There's a wonderful line by the author James Baldwin, who's one of my favorite writers, and he said, love is like the lightning bolt. Love is where you find it. And it's true. It's simply not so black and white. What will you do when love shows up in its messy package?